streamed can do that.
Okay, we're streaming.
Are we really?
Okay. I have that ready. So
oh my goodness. You're so prompt. Oh, and look at that. It came up right away. That's so exciting. Oh my God, I look crazy.
It could be worse.
It's not a pretty day.
Yeah,
I'm here melting.
I know Robin told me yesterday that they had a heat wave out there in Nevada, and but yesterday it was like 65 there, and she was like a bit of a cold front here, and I was like, give me it.
Yeah, that sounds
so hot here.
Amazing. If I could go somewhere that goes, like maybe it gets down to like 40 at night, and then like during the day it's like never hotter than 70 with like a nice little breeze.
Yeah, it's called Northern California, and properties there are very, very, very expensive.
Well, I feel like, am I just gonna have to like perpetually chase a spring and fall kind of climate?
Yeah, you're gonna have to become a snowbird. You're gonna be a snowbird at 40.
It's more than a snowbird though, because I don't find Florida ever nice. Like it's just never nice in Florida. So maybe like a North Carolina. I enjoyed the weather in North Carolina except for the summer. But then even here, I'm like, man, do I gotta go up to Canada? Like to get away from
No, because I talked to Tish yesterday, and Tish said it was like 92 in Toronto, or no, she doesn't live in Toronto, does she? I can't remember. She's East Coast, like she's in our time zone, but I'm pretty sure she said it was like 92 yesterday.
I don't like that at all. Hey, Marie. I don't like that at all. Not at all. Not at all. So while we're waiting for some people to pop in, I wanted to show something that I thought, people might find a little interesting.
Okay.
Do I have share? Okay, cool. Share screen.
Hey, Janet. Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks. 65.
Okay. So, for people that, is that coming through okay?
Yeah,
okay. For people that, don't know, and also don't judge my tabs. For people that like don't know, or maybe aren't a part of this, Dawn Ronigan has a Facebook group called Antique and Vintage Needlework Tools. Look, there's Stephanie right there and her mom.
Yeah.
I am a member of this group, and from time to time, Dawn does a thing called Featured Collector, and it was recently me. So
it was. Yeah.
There's pictures on there of, so like this picture here is in my upstairs hallway. When you come up the stairs to the left, there's like a little nook. There's actually like a wall right here that juts out. And I meant to buy this case to fit on the jutted wall. So it should be facing like this way. It doesn't fit by like 2 inches. I was so
yeah, welcome to my world.
oh, so angry. So yeah, so I sent her, like, she asked for like kind of a display, and this actually isn't the only place that I display stuff, and that is not all of the collection. It's just what I have thrown in that area and prettied up a little bit. And then I gave a couple of
little spreads of stuff.
Yeah, this was
actually such cute things. There are things in here I haven't seen before.
I'm sure there are things in here I haven't seen before. This was my first ever, oh my God, what does she call them? Like flat photo, I guess.
Flat lays, yeah.
Yeah. Dawn likes to do photos like this a lot. And she was like, you should totally do one of these. So I was like, this seems like a nice time to practice. So I just like grabbed a couple of shirting repro fat quarters and a couple of needlework pieces and just laid down a few things. And then
It
I
looks
took
really good. It looks
thanks.
very professional.
And then I took a couple of, better photo. Oh, look, here's a stiletto. Better photos of just some close-up stuff that she collaged. And then there's also a little, like in the comments, she posted interview questions that I answered.
Oh, cool. I missed that part. I looked quickly through the
It
pictures.
kind of, the way it's like presented, it kind of looks like her comment instead of like putting a little note up there that says like interview.
I didn't open the thread. I just was like, oh, pretty.
Yeah, there's interview questions in there. A few things that I actually haven't ever talked about. So if anybody, is interested in looking at that, go join her group. And there's lots of other good stuff. Like right now, she's kind of like, she'll come up with kind of little themes every now and then for people to post from their collections.
Is it still the blue theme right now?
It's blue. Yeah. So lots of people, yours truly included, have, gathered little bits of goodies from their collection of things that are blue and have posted them. It's a great way to kind of get, a big breadth of different things that you can look at that you haven't been exposed to before. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I will say though, just as a little FYI, it's not good for your wallet because
yes, because you're like, oh, I've never seen that before. I want one of those things. Let me go find it.
And it's funny. And I think someone in particular that is related to you, Steph, had that happen to them.
Probably, yes.
The blue things. I think I think someone's mom may have been, look at this thing that I bought after seeing it in the blues.
And I'm pretty sure that now that you told me what it was and she told me what it was, but never sent me a picture, I'm pretty sure I know what it is. And I was getting ready to bid on one that was online and I decided not to, because something else caught my eye, but yeah.
Oh, so you bid on something else. Did you win said bid on something else?
Well, I purchased something else.
It was at that same time. Oh,
I thought it was around the same time. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you are your mother's daughter.
I am, but I had to buy my rat of Nim. I don't know what else to call her.
She's definitely not a rat. She's like
a little mousy
little mouse mama.
A little country mouse. Yeah. I showed her off yesterday.
Before we get into assigning stuff for our next book, let us show you what our next book will be.
So, yeah, I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah, we're obviously doing Crazy Quilts next, but we like to tell you ahead of time. So when we were at the Penn Dry Goods show, we had a little talk with our friend Ann Hermes, who just gave a talk while we were there that we went to that was fabulous. It was about gingham embroidery. Hey, Steph, is there any chance you could grab the pens?
I can. Yeah, I actually have them open from yesterday because I shared.
Because I shared
the links yesterday.
Yeah, I just totally forgot that the lectures are now available to purchase for online if you weren't able to go. Totally, you guys should go to this conference antique show next year if you can. Like, it's totally worth it. And it's small enough that you can actually spend time with people, whereas like AQSG is huge and it's very busy and it's hard to really get like a lot of time with people. But now they do recordings, and actually I haven't watched the recording. Dawn has watched the recording. I should have asked her if you can, if you watch the recording, pay attention in the very beginning, because Anne totally picks at me for teasing her about her conference or her lecture being at the Buckcracker Dawn. It was very funny. So, yes, there's that. And then we talked with her because she has done some research and some things, and she has an Etsy site. And one thing that she does is she does these hooked rug mats.
These hooked rugs, yeah.
I have a couple of them. I actually should have grabbed them to bring up, but they're really cute, and they're like like big coaster size. She does commissions and stuff too, like
She does, yeah.
animals.
She was working on a commission when we saw her.
But we're gonna do her book here, Patchwork Pillowcases, which she has put into her Etsy site, especially for us to get. Of course, you can find her book other places, but we always try to make sure that we're supporting researchers and authors and things when we can. There's lots of times when we can't, they're gone, it's the book's out of print, this book is technically out of print, but Anne still has quite a few copies of her own. So it would be great if you could support her and buy the book from her.
And let her know that we sent you.
Yeah. Well, and so she is going, just like when we did with Dawn, she is going to do an interview with us when we're done with the book. I don't know yet if she'll show up in the chat when we're around. We haven't talked that far yet. But she's super fun and we love her. And
the book is really, really interesting because
have
it's
you
about
actually already read it?
I have, because I have it. I bought it literally right before I met her and was
I
like,
found out I do have it. I just haven't read it.
I was like, holy moly, I just bought your book and now I've met you. These patchwork pillowcases were only made, like, as best as her research, and I've seen other people have talked about the research too, that they were really just made in Pennsylvania. Like they are not something that you're going to find all over the country. And if you do find them elsewhere, there's probably a good chance it's a Pennsylvania connection. So that's what this book is about. And it's I mean, it's there. If you like to do small projects, there's a lot of, I mean, there's not projects in it, but there's a lot of inspiration that, you know.
Well, speaking of projects, she's done a lot of small quilt patterns for some magazines. I think she's done some for like Piecework or something like that. So who knows? Potentially we could end up with like another 100-day project kind of scenario.
Maybe.
Where we maybe do a little something. She's a very interesting person to talk to, and we are gonna have super fun talking to her.
She's a former chemist.
Is she former? I don't know if she's retired.
She's retired.
Okay.
I want to say like last year was like, I think might have been her first year like out of the lab. But yeah, she talked, my mom and I talked to her pretty extensively last year about her job, and it was like, did not sound like the most interesting thing in the world. And she said that, like, she worked for like the company that does asphalt paint or something like that. Like, but I'm like, you're like super smart lady. Like, you worked in a lab, you're a chemist. So yeah, she's got a really interesting, you know, viewpoint on things because she comes from science. So,
and she's like a phenomenal artist. She does like all kinds
she
of
is.
Her
yeah,
big thing
all of
is
her
like rug hooking.
Mhm.
But she's done that like stump work. She's done a couple of workshops on that. She lives not far from Penn's in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, she's right outside Philadelphia, I think.
I actually, one of the ones that I have is like this one right here, is one of like, I think like the first ones that she made when she started selling them.
I need to snag one from her. I think of, you know, every time I see her stuff, because she puts it out there a lot on her Instagram, you know, what she's working on, and I'm like, oh, I need to buy one. They're so cute.
Yeah, I know Dawn has had, I think one or two made of her cats. I bought one that she made of a black cat because it looked like our black cat. I never commissioned her to make a sugar glider or anything.
A life-size sugar glider.
Yeah.
A little tiny mat.
they're really nice, and they're really nicely done and very reasonably priced. Okay, so that was all I had to share there.
Yeah, that I was gonna share the Schwenkfelder video series. Again, I shared it yesterday on my stream, but they're really good. And actually there's one I'm gonna buy that I missed. The Alden O'Brien one.
Well, wait. Oh, that's the one we didn't go to because it was early.
Yeah, it was.
Day. But
yeah,
there
it was
is.
The Alden.
But you did get the recording. For
I actually missed one of my. Yeah, I accidentally missed one of my own lectures. My mother was sitting in the lecture going, "Where is she?" And I'm moseying around buying stuff at the antique part. And Jill says, "So when's your next lecture?" And I said, 11:15. And she goes, "Girl, it's 11:45."
we were just having too much fun. It was like really, like I can't stress enough how fun and low key it is, as opposed to, if I'm comparing to AQSG. they're both really great, but AQSG's significantly more investment to go and much longer. This is only 2 days. So if you want to get your feet wet and, you know, try something but without like a huge commitment, like this is so the way to go. It will definitely remain like a staple on my calendar unless there's a reason I can't go, which is why
me too.
like Dawn couldn't go this year, and we were joking that it wasn't as well attended this year, and like what's up with that. And I totally told Dawn, you know, people heard she wasn't going, so they didn't go.
It's possible. It's quite possible.
All right. So
Yeah, so we ready to jump in here?
hold on. Before we jump in, let me just, I'll say again at the end, but assignment now, because your next book, you technically have in hand Crazy Quilts. If you don't have it in hand, you still have time to get it. And again, there's a reason we're reading this. The New England Quilt Museum has the exhibit curated by Cheryl Sloboda. That's steampunk.
Right. I keep forgetting that Cheryl is the one who curated it.
I didn't even know she curated it until they put the graphic up. So one of the things that the show was technically too small for any QM space. So what they did to fill in the space is they put up a bunch of our crazy quilts. You know, to show Victorian influence on a lot of the steampunk pieces. So I am happy to, like, you know, do a stream where we look at steampunk stuff, but I thought particularly we could look at crazy quilts at the end of this book, and that would be really nice. Since this book, going through it today, it's not going to take us long at all. I think we might hit it in 3 chunks because it's so many pictures. So that'll be a nice wrap up. So for
it's gonna be soothing for the soul after we've
oh
been
my
through
God.
Talula.
Oh, Talula. So for the 25th, what we're going to be reading is the intro through pattern. That's pages 9 through 33. And I will, of course, post that in all the places that I post things.
Yes, and there will be lots of great pictures to look at because it's
oh my God, so many. It was hard, like when I was going through, like, you know, like how far are we going to go, going, oh, look at that, and no, don't look at that. I got other things to do. So yeah, all right, let's get going here with girlfriend Talula.
You know, there was one thing I think I forgot to mention last week. You know, because we jumped excuse me, we jumped right into
what, heartbreak, because that's all we can jump into is just heartbreak after heartbreak.
Yeah, and now I can't find where it was. It in here. It was in here about her cousin. I think it's her cousin, Puss Magnum. I was like, oh, here it is, Cousin Puss. Yeah, Puss Magnum. So this was in the previous chapters, chapter 15. I'm like, I realize that I'm putting a modern spin on this, but I was like, dang, girl, that would be like a super triple X name, right? you know, if you had to earn some money for the farm and you went into the adult industry, you could be like, I'll just use my real name. Sorry, guys.
I don't think anyone was putting their feet pics on OnlyFans back then. Okay.
Oh my God. When I read that, I was like, what a name.
I mean, it's funny because I don't,
you have to find something to laugh at in this book.
Oh yeah. Is that going to be in like your review? Like the one thing that kept
not much to laugh about.
Yeah, that kept me from you know, going into state mourning was Talula's cousin, who had a questionable name.
All right. So,
you know, I have to say, in finishing this up, I you know, God, because last week's discussion was I was like, can we have something great? You know,
the lifeboat.
And
the lifeboat is great.
But literally the first sentence, Talula's niece Molly died suddenly. I'm
Like
like, I
Nancy
was like,
Lou.
there's no such thing now as like died suddenly. Like, tell me, you know what would be shocking? People are alive suddenly. Like, this
Mhm.
person lived. Oh my God, yay. Like
Well, Tom outlived her. And I mean, Tom was in poor health. Tom outlived her by what, 20, was it
20
18 months,
months.
21 months, something like that. It
20
was just less
months.
than two
Yeah.
years. Yeah. So, yeah. Although my guess is Tom's fervor and his depression over some of, or particularly his one son, was it Matt dying? I think he probably did not fare well once Talula went.
I'm actually
But
surprised it lasted 20 months given how long they were together because statistically it's
yeah,
usually about
yeah.
6 months to a year.
I did not read ahead and I truly expected him to go first. I
I
really
did
did.
too. I did too.
Yeah.
Although, I'll bet you part of kind of what kept him going as long as it did is it said like every day he walked to her grave, the half mile.
Mhm.
So that kind of
Yeah.
exercise and, emotionally kind of, corporeally being with her, um,
Yeah, for sure.
would probably have helped him to keep going. But yeah, we start off with like her super beloved niece, Molly,
hmm Not to be
dying.
confused with Molly Ruth. It took me a while there. I was like, ugh. And then there's the picture, and that's Molly. That's Molly, her niece, not Molly, her daughter, right?
Which picture are we talking about?
On page 138.
Yes, that's Molly the niece. And then
Yeah.
later on, the picture with Margaret gone with the
Margaret
Wind
Mitchell.
Rider, that's Molly
Yeah.
Ruth, her daughter.
We'll get to that.
Yes.
I
So
think I
once
like Molly Ruth a whole lot. So
yes, once her niece Molly dies, that's when she gets really close with Molly Ruth and they start,
Mhm.
writing fervently. Um and I one thing I found really interesting in here is that like on 145, it points out that like as Tallulah's children moved around the country, they entered their mom's quilts into competitions
Yes.
and she won ribbons and things.
And I'm wondering if that may have something to do with many of them or a bunch of them being saved, that they had blue ribbons or some kind of paperwork that said they won a prize or they won a
Mm-hmm.
ribbon attached to them, because that people did that. If they entered a quilt and it won a ribbon, they would keep like the stuff on it, like the Sears Century Progress quilts, like those
Mm-hmm.
have a very special tag on the back of them and people just keep that on them. They don't take it off, especially if it won a prize. So I'm thinking that maybe many of the families that had these quilts that won a prize probably were like, oh, this is a family heirloom, we'll pass it down, versus the person who was like, oh yeah, I had it in the back of the car as a dog bed. you know
I mean, I certainly hope like this is, they don't say if it won a prize or not, but um this I think is one of my favorite quilts in the entire book.
Yes, the lifeboat. Uh-huh.
Well, this is
And
one of
there's
them. Like, there's the other one on the other page, but like
yeah.
this other motif with it. Oh,
Mhm.
I oh my goodness.
Oh yeah, the one on the other page is lifeboat too. Um, yes, and this is an interesting block, and this was described in her paper, and I think Nancilu Burdick's paper, and I think if remember me telling you, I was reading the paper to my stream,
Hmm.
and I did not have the actual copy of Uncoverings. I had the version of it from the Quilt Index, which only gives you the text. You don't get the pictures. Not right now, at
Although back
least.
then, would there have been pictures?
Yeah. Oh,
Wasn't
yeah. There was pictures.
there is
There's a
okay.
picture of it in there. Yeah. So, but just an FYI, guys, that will be changing soon. You will be able to see uncoverings. If you're a member of AQSG, you'll be able to see uncoverings in all of their glory at some point in the future.
And the text will be searchable.
Yeah, keyword searchable and everything. It'll be awesome. But anyway, so I was reading that and she describes it in the paper, and I'm like, I cannot even wrap my head around what this thing looks like. And so but I was like, wait, we're getting ready to read the book, so it must be in the book. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay. It did not look like anything like I expected it to, but it was a
Yeah.
pleasant surprise because I was like, this is an amazing quilt. And this is the one I was thinking of last week, where those little blue things that she says look like oars, those are pieced and not appliqued.
Oh.
Yeah, these are the ones. And I think I'm trying to see, it's in here somewhere where she says, um, yeah, it's okay. So it's in the little sidebar. It says in Talula's quilt, the 5 blue oars at the corners of each square are pieced to 4 little tornado-shaped funnels of fine white fabric.
You know, I read that, but actually, like, the
So
piece part just went right over my head.
yeah, so if you look really close, you can see, I mean, they're not they're not like straight, triangular. They're like literally little funnels, and they kind of they tilt to either side depending on where you're piecing them in.
It's hard to tell
Um,
with the quilting.
yeah, but I mean, you can see in there, you can kind of see that little shape in between the blue things, and you're like, oh my
If I
gosh.
had a magnifying glass, I probably could, but it's not easy to tell with the quilting.
Yeah, like I would not have ever considered doing that. I just would have been like, okay, piece those, I mean, the little red and white piece, the little arch-shaped piece, that is enough,
Yeah.
And I think, see, and I can't tell us, Lifeboat 2 does not have the little diamonds.
No.
Lifeboat 2 just has the solid pieces, but yeah, those little diamonds, I mean, whew, that was a
Oh no,
feat in and of
definitely like
itself.
this lifeboat is definitely far more complicated.
Hmm. Yeah, so I would have struggled through those little diamonds. I probably would have made one block. I would have struggled through those diamonds, and I would have done the little blue things
The way you do it, it's like
applique.
jazz hands.
Oh, that's what they look like. They do little jazz hands. Um, yeah, I would have appliqued those on. I never ever would have
Oh
thought
yeah.
to piece them. You guys. I mean, and I have seen things where, it's been expressed like, here's this circular shape or this very like the kind of shape that nobody in their right mind would piece. Like you would all, anybody who's,
Well, I mean, with
who's,
all the loss, maybe she's technically in her wrong mind. Like
yeah. But yeah, it's always shocking to me that, when they did that to set something in like that.
yeah,
Crazy.
I would not.
Yeah. I thought it was, talking about the upstairs hall, 12 feet wide, which was
Mhm.
designed for her quilt frame, how cold it was up there. And I was like, yeah. I mean, I think about my own house. If we don't have I mean, we have baseboards now, but when we first bought this house, we didn't have heat upstairs. And so, yeah, it was cold up there. We had to have space heaters and stuff until we got our baseboards installed. Yeah, and if you don't heat it, it's as cold upstairs as,
Yeah,
you know.
my quilt room here does not have heat at all. The rest of the house has radiators.
Mhm.
So yeah, I have a space heater because technically like the heat rises, and for
Yeah.
sleeping, I would probably never put on a heater in here. But for, just, working and being, I have to have a space heater in this little room. So if I had a quilt frame in here and I wasn't doing much to move blood around, I'd probably be pretty chilly. Janet says the lifeboat quilt reminds me of the song in Guys and Dolls about sit down, you rock in the boat.
Rocking the boat. I'm trying to remember. I know I've seen Guys and Dolls. Our high school did a production of it. Um, I mean, I think the lifeboat probably speaks to a lot of people for a lot of different reasons. Um, but
I
yeah,
actually
how
think
she's
that's a better name for it than Wig's Defeat, because
yeah,
it kind of looks like a
well,
lifeboat.
and for her, yeah. I mean, to her, like, I mean, Nancilu talks in here like it was an ironic name,
Mm-hmm.
and like quilting kind of was her lifeboat. I mean, from what we've
Mm-hmm.
seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Speaking of that, kind of in the, like more like 45 to 46, when she's talking about kind of Tallulah's feelings of not being bothered by competition or changes in fashion, or, she's just
Mhm.
going about her business and not being influenced really by any of that, or emotionally involved in any of that. For the quilting for her was far more, it's almost spiritual, I guess, to a certain degree. And
Yeah.
in reading that, I sympathize with that, because in my quilting, so many people have been like, oh, are you going to enter anything into a show? Are you going to this? Are you going to that? And like, I might consider like showing something in an exhibit, but I was like, nothing about competition does anything for me at all. Like it's like I could not care less about having my work scrutinized in that way, I suppose. It,
Yeah.
it's never ever a thought
Um,
that crosses my mind.
yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't like competition. I want to show my quilts. Like
Yeah,
that's
it
my whole
show
thing. I
them.
don't
Yeah.
that's the reason why I have entered things or I have submitted to galleries and stuff is simply because I want to show my quilt.
Hmm.
I don't like the competition either. You
No.
know, honestly, I suspect a lot of quilters don't like the competition.
Some
They
of them
just
do,
oh,
some
yeah.
do. They
Yeah.
seem to, I mean, they seem to take a lot of pride in their quilts, winning competitions. I mean, good for them. Like if that's what's exciting to them, like cool. But
Mhm.
someone had talked to me once kind of making it sound almost like, well, this is the next step. And I'm like, no, it's not.
You mean like the next step from giving a lecture is publishing?
Yeah. Yeah.
See, I
Like,
like to lecture you guys. I don't really want to publish, but
yeah.
I've been told
Publishing is such a
must publish.
hassle.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's
Um, so page 43, the pink piney.
yeah.
I love that because you know how many relatives I have who say stuff like that.
Really?
Go out back and cut some pineys for the table. Yeah, the pineys, the pineys. Yeah.
If you said that to me
Or
at
the
theater,
peonies.
I think you would mean like up like pine tree clippings.
Right. The pineys or the peonies, yeah. The peonies.
It's funny in like reading that. Do you know what I thought about? The woman that I shared the hoop house with at the Mid Atlantic Antique Show, what would you call her? Flower farmer?
Flower farmer, yeah.
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 And that she had her double roses there that everyone kept calling peonies.
Yes, and they
And she's
kept
like, no,
saying they look like
they're
peonies,
double
yeah.
roses.
Yeah. So the next two pages, these bird quilts. So first of all, the one that's on page, it's on the left-hand side, 144.
Mm-hmm.
So that is it's a newspaper quilt. It's a Nancy Page quilt. And I have the pattern. I downloaded it from newspapers.com, which is like the best thing since sliced bread. I am 90% sure. Now, I could be wrong, and I have not looked at the picture and I've not compared side by side, but there is a picture in my Dr. Dunn lecture where I thought it was funny. I included it because he said in his notes, look at this quilt. It's a modern quilt. And like, this is his version of a modern quilt. But his notes, the woman that showed him the quilt and that he took pictures of it, basically told him that it was every bird was different and how it was it was some special design. And I was like, at the time, I remember thinking, I swear that's a Nancy Page quilt. Um, but now seeing this, I'm like, I'm pretty sure that was a Nancy Page quilt. And that woman told Dr. Dunton that it was all of her own design.
Gotta love people like that.
Yep. But
Um,
also on this page, I thought it was funny. It says that she so the Greek keyboarder appealed to her. I thought that was really interesting. And she talks about the meek bird and the saucy bird. That is what they were called.
mhm.
Saucy bird's the one with his beak up, and meek bird is the one with his beak down. And she talks about buying bags of scraps from Sears Roebuck.
Yeah, I thought that was cool. Now,
Yeah, yeah,
when she
and this
says
is the
that,
time period for that.
now when she says that, are we talking actual bags? Or are we talking those boxes?
I don't know. I mean, I've seen stuff advertised, and I'm trying to think if I've seen Sears.
Because like in the like the needlecraft magazines and stuff that I've been looking at, where I'm sending you guys, oh my god, it's gonna be so fun. We're totally gonna do a show at some point about antique
Yeah,
advertising, and we've been collecting,
there's
so
some
it's
good
so
stuff.
cool. But I've never, in some of those, I remember a couple of them were Sears stuff, but I don't remember if any of they were showing the box, that
Mhm.
box that
Yeah, I'm
I
not
don't think I've
sure.
ever
And
seen an actual bag.
yeah, and I think if I remember correctly, they're scraps from like the garment manufacturing, I think. And yeah, I mean, and I mean, you think about the fact like we look at these quilts and we say, oh, they must have, these clothing pieces that they must have recycled, and it's like, nah, actually, they were buying sacks of scraps from Sears.
Well, I mean, it's probably a
So
little of column
yeah.
A, a little of column B. Like if you've only got, if you want variety and you've
Hmm.
got 5 kids, you might not have as much variety as
Hmm.
you want in like wool
Right.
suiting. So
Yeah, well, yeah, and if you have a large family, and your clothing, handed down, you may just never end up with like, clothing once it's gone through a number of kids, it's probably not, I mean, it's not worth anything but rags. And if you made that clothing, you might have like the cabbage from the clothing. But yeah, I suspect a lot more people bought these kind of ready-made scrap bags than
I
we
buy
think.
them now. They're awesome.
Yeah.
Like I love me a scrap bag, or like you go to the quilt store and they go like, "Hey, dig in this bin, fill a bag for $5 or whatever."
Mhm.
Janet loves your meek
Yeah.
and saucy birds.
Yeah, and that is exactly what they're called. It was so funny when I read that. So I was like, I remember Meek Bird and Saucy Bird. There's a pattern for them.
Oh, it sounds like it needs to be like a salt and pepper shaker.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's funny because I was like, well, I mean, Saucy Bird's looking up, but Meek Bird, I mean, he's meek because he's looking down. I mean, what if there's a worm in that pot? He's like the early bird, not the meek bird.
Or scavenger bird.
Yeah. Or gonna have dinner bird and meek birds or Saucy Bird's like,
Well,
whoops, I didn't get the worm.
speaking more of birds, like on the next page there,
Yeah.
145, like
I
what's the
struggled at first.
deal?
I was like, what am I looking at here?
Yeah, so like I did that too. I was like there's birds, and then I'm like, how are they bird? And then I was like, oh my God, like did she ever realize that it's upside down?
Yeah, I'm sure that she knew, and it was one of those things where, ugh. um,
Yeah, so like
yeah,
I once I finally flipped the book over and realized, because I was like, are these birds committing suicide? Like what's going on here? That would have been something that would have made me at the time really angry at the editor.
yeah. Well, Rutledge, they made a mistake. But at least Nancilu's name is right because Dr. Dutton's name was wrong on his dust jacket.
Oh, how no
Um,
one how no one noticed that.
but what I will say about this particular quilt, even though it's irritating that they published it upside down, it is so different than her other quilts.
Yep.
And like the Nancy Page quilt, the birds, or it's called Garden Bouquet, I think it's got a lot in common, say, with the Sunbonnet Sue and the Colonial Girl, Dutch Baby,
Yeah, kind
whatever.
of her that era she's in. Like
Yeah, I mean it's very 1930s. But
I
this
love the border design on it,
on
on the
which
birds,
one?
the garden
The,
bouquet bird.
oh, yeah, the Greek key. Um, but the bluebirds in easy applique, which is an odd name, but that is so very different. And I suspect it's because she made it quickly because it was her granddaughter, right? Yeah, her granddaughter was sick with tuberculosis.
Mm-hmm.
And it's tied. It is a tied quilt. It's not quilted.
So, Janet doesn't think it's upside down.
Um, well, if it's not upside down, they're hanging from the limb.
Yeah, she's like, I see 2 birds on a limb, one's tall, one's not. I see those too, but they're
Yeah,
totally
if you
upside down.
turn, yeah, in my opinion, if you
Yeah.
turn them the other way, they make more sense, like with that branch
Well,
underneath, like
and
at the bottom or something.
at first, when I was thinking they were upside down, I thought, oh, is it just my perspective? Was it like half are facing this way, half are facing, you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I thought at first. It was one of
Um,
those deals, but like,
and no, they're
no.
all they're all facing that. So it really
Yeah.
makes far more sense to me if I flip them over. Then I see 2 birds standing on a tree limb, kind
Right.
of
And they're,
like singing, yeah, to each other.
yeah, they're kind of like, yeah, like that kind of. And
Um,
it's interesting that they're called bluebird. And I'm assuming bluebirds in easy applique is like the name of the pattern, like wherever she got it.
mhm.
I would almost like they almost look like lovebirds to me, like not bluebirds, but like, you know, like the kind of thing that you would, like
It'd be funny to ask our friend Mary Kay, because Mary Kay was friends with Nancy, if if they're upside down, like, because I really think they're upside down. Like, I don't think they're like hanging. Because if this quilt isn't pictured upside down, it means that the birds are hanging upside down.
Yeah. They're weird birds, but okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I go back to the fact that is less important to me than the fact that it's just so different than her other quilts. And it's tied. And I mean, she could very well have made other tied quilts, but this is the only one that's shown.
I mean, I agree with you. It's probably like tied and everything because of the haste. Because in other places, she talks about how it takes her about 6 weeks to quilt a quilt.
Yeah, and also this one was very thick and heavy.
Yep.
And so I'm thinking like she was thinking of that. Was it the characteristic chills and fever of TB?
And she made it with hand-carded wool instead of cotton.
Yeah, and so that was probably the other piece of it, is that quilting it would have been harder than, you know, and it was really more of a utility quilt for her granddaughter than it was for something to be pretty.
Yeah, actually the wool probably would have been too much to bother giving a good quilt to, you know.
Yeah.
I have one thing on this page.
But hold on one second. Hold on one second though. But isn't that amazing that this is her go-to? Somebody's sick? Let me go make a quilt.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm sure it was, oh, somebody's getting married, Talula's got to make a quilt. New baby coming, Talula's making a quilt for all the babies, all the grandchildren.
For someone that loved quilting as much as she did, I would use it any excuse. Someone's out of toilet paper, I gotta make a quilt. Like, any excuse I could possibly come up with. Oh, you broke your toe? Quilt. Like,
yeah. Quilts were her love language. Like, you know, I'm like, I wish I could make quilts fast enough to give everybody I love a quilt. But my policy is, if you cannot treat the quilt with respect, you don't get a quilt. So it's a very small list of people that get quilts.
Yes, they're not always as treasured now as they used to be. But she also hand piecing later on, like in like the last chapter here, she hand pieces a quilt within like a week. I can't even often piece a quilt in a week with a machine. Janet thinks that the limb is drooping down off.
I'm wondering if there were multiple printings of this and they fixed it.
Oh, maybe we have a different printing.
Yeah, because see, ours is drooping. Yeah, ours is not drooping to the right like it should. Yeah.
Yeah, so
see, ours is.
Here's our photo, Janet. That's if the book is right side up, that's our photo.
Yeah. I'm wondering if they did a second, like a second printing, or they.
Well, I'm hoping, because what a boo-boo to make.
Yeah, I think if I was Nancilu, I would have been like, "You're gonna be printing me some new books for free."
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's possible. Janet, your book might have them in the right orientation.
I certainly hope so. But on this page, this Lucille Hilty, blurb. Making a quilt is an organic process closely related to the deepest feelings one has about life and the society in which one lives. It is the union of the hands with the mind and the spirit. And for anyone wondering, that was written by Lucille Hilty. It's a quote from an article called A Passion for Quilt Making, which is printed in American Quilt Study Group's Uncoverings 1980. And just as a little side note, if you don't want to go and buy a bunch of back issues of stuff, if you're a member of New England Quilt Museum, the library has that for loan, and they will ship. Just an FYI. And also Janet says, yes, hers is right side up compared to ours. So there, mystery solved. Yes,
Rutledge Press fixed it somehow.
They just didn't go around and steal everyone's crappy copy.
Actually, now that you mention it, well, no, you do not have one of these. You had this book already, right?
Yes. It's
okay.
Not
so I have Mary Kay's copy. Mary Kay sent me a copy, and so I was thinking for a minute, because she and Nancilu were friends. I was wondering maybe if there were early versions of it that, you know, a limited few. Okay.
And DeMarie's is also
DeMarie's is upside down too. Yeah.
Well, there we go. So there has to be a story there, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm
sure
Mary
there is.
Kay, if Mary Kay, if you're watching, you know, can
We'll
come
have
on
to,
here.
yeah, we'll have to
Oh,
ask
wait,
her.
my phone just beeped. Like, am I gonna? Do I have a? No.
It's Mary Kay.
It's Mary Kay. So
Um,
Mary Kay says the birds.
oh my gosh, it really is her.
It really is Mary Kay. You have a text message too whenever you take your phone off airplane mode. She said the birds in applique is an Alice Brooks pattern. She said, I meant to send you the pattern illustration as it appeared in the newspaper, and you can look it up. Oh, wait, this might be a different one. She's talking about, I think she's talking about your other thing. Is this the same birds? Nope, it's this one.
No, I think
She said she said she is watching Mary Kay. I was just gonna like reply to you and I'm like, why am I doing that? Mary Kay is there a drama about the picture being printed upside down? Like, did you hear about that? And she said,
I'm interested to know.
No.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because you know, Rutledge Press, I know, I think they publish some of Mary Kay's books, and you know, they're a Tennessee book publisher that, and I think I remember Mary Kay telling me like they treated these authors very well. So I'm guessing it was a whoops. Let's reprint your book real quick, Nancy Lou.
Oh, wait,
yeah,
no, she said
stuff happens, you know.
She said, I'm sure there is, but maybe she wasn't privy to it at the time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, stuff happens. To
it
me,
would
that
definitely explain why there would be a second printing, because I feel like, and I mean, someone correct, I could be wrong at because I don't know enough, but I feel like a lot of these kinds of books were so niche they wouldn't necessarily end up with a second printing.
Well, Janet says she has a paperback version of this. I didn't know that it was in paperback. So
I didn't know
that must be the second printing. Must have been the paperback version. Yeah.
She said, I just got my glasses adjusted today, so I thought I was losing it.
Like when we were giving Robin grief about the earlier thing, and I think it was their marriage certificate. We were like, no, Robin, and she's like, I'm not looking at that part, you dummies.
Well, to be fair, she could have said that. So she said, Mary Kay also said that this book was reviewed in the New York Times. And she said that they did several printings. And Janet says that hers is printed in Hong Kong by Palace Press on the copyright page. That's interesting. So
well, I mean, it's a fantastic book, and I mean, Talula's life story is so interesting. So it's no surprise to me at all that this had multiple printings. Yeah.
Thanks for your input, by the way, Mary Kay, from your
armchair
on your phone.
I'm so glad you're listening. I knew that you were going to be taking a little bit of a break for a while, but I'm glad that you're listening and hope you're doing well. So let's talk about Tom Bottoms.
You have things to say about Tom Bottoms.
I do have things. So he resisted mightily when his children wanted to give him a radio.
A battery operated radio.
Newfangled nonsense. That's just gonna be a fad. How many times have you heard stuff like that about TV,
it reminds
radio,
me of
computers?
that one scene in Downton Abbey where they want to get the wireless radio, and he said it's a fad, it won't last.
So funny. But yeah, it's funny how like they get him one anyway, and then he's like finally like, all right, okay, I could deal with the news and the religious stuff. But honestly, I mean, I see Tom Bottoms as, and you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, but he is a little bit of a frightening character to me, simply because, and I'm not saying there was anything wrong with this man, but he seems like, you know, within my family, you know, I have a lot of these country folk, and he seems like one of those people who is like, he's so very convicted about his faith, and he's not putting himself on a pedestal, but he's basically like looking around at everybody else and is like, you all read the same Bible I do. Why aren't you holding yourselves accountable the way I am? You know, I mean, it's kind of like that kind of, you know, is the, you know, the gist I get from him. And they talk about him sort of being this quiet man and how, you know, I mean, he was very emotionally affected when his children died and things like that. But he's the kind of person where, you know, he's quiet, 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 this country man, and then all of a sudden he's like, and like scares you with an outburst.
Mhm.
And it's typically going to be something like religious. You know, and you're gonna be like, oh God. That's kind of like this gist, like, you know, like the feeling I get about Tom is like kind of like that. And yeah, you know, and they talk about how both of them really spent their whole lives unwell, you
Mhm.
know, and but then I think like neither of them are feeling well. He has something that they think is a stroke, but then I see in like the footnotes to that or the end notes to that one, it was kind of like, what did they say? What did she say? It's something to the effect of they thought it was his teeth or something, right? This
I
was
don't
in
know
the,
that I
yeah.
read that end note.
Yeah, the doctors decided his paralysis of one side was caused by bad teeth. Several abscessed, so all his teeth were pulled. He would never get a plate, but lived on toothless, his beard an adequate camouflage.
Hmm.
Beard will cover it. But yeah, I mean, you kind of wondered, like, he appears to have a stroke, but he amazes his doctors with his recovery. So having his teeth pulled, I mean, you know, and we're finding out nowadays that your teeth
Yeah,
health
it
have
really
so much to do
affects.
with,
Yeah.
yeah, and can it, I mean, it can give you heart trouble and things like that. So it's quite possible that it was something like a stroke, but it was caused by his teeth. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just, all of those things, the fact that, you know, they've had tuberculosis, he had malaria, she had an operation at a time when I
I
don't
wouldn't
know that
want
I
to
would,
have any operations.
I don't know that I would be going to the sanitarium for an operation on my lady bits at the early 19th, early 20th century. Like, no, let me die. Cause you know, you're not putting a knife on me. Um, but they all they both lived, you know, into their 80s, which is a respectable age, I think. I mean, even
That's
today.
that's uh that is way beyond expectation,
Yeah.
you know, at that
Yeah.
time.
And I mean, think of war. These people saw, well, I
They
mean,
lived through
technically
two.
didn't see three wars, but yeah, they kind, well,
Oh
I
no,
mean,
three. I'm sorry, you're right, three.
yeah, I mean, they technically were both alive for the Civil War.
Hmm.
Even they were babies, but the
Hmm.
fact that they lived from Civil War to World War II and everything that happened in between there is, you know, it's a lot. And I mean, it's really kind of the same way for people, you know, I mean, like my grandmother was born in 1925 and she died in 2018. And I think from that time, from 1925 to the 2000s, that is a crazy span, right? And
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure we all know people that have lived from, you know, airplanes just started flying, you know, to we got AI, you know, it's crazy. And I feel like the two of them, they lived that same kind of, you know, huge changes in the world from the time they were born to the
Mass
time they died.
advancement.
Yeah. Um, but when they talk about the well with the bucket,
Yep.
that's something my grandmother used to talk about. You put the milk down, the milk and the butter and the cream go down, you know,
Did
and
she
everything
ever
and go down and
spill
down.
like a whole jug of?
No, because my great grandmother didn't mess around and everything had a lid on it. She wasn't lowering an open bucket of milk into the well. She was putting stuff in like bottles or jars or whatever, something that had a covering on it and it went down. And because my grandmother was like, because I asked that question. I was like, how did stuff fall out? And she's like, no, you didn't dunk it all the way in. You just got it down in there just far enough into the water that it just kind of sat there and the coolness kept it.
Have you watched the I think it's Netflix, the Anne with an E, the remake of Anne of Green Gables?
I have not.
So I haven't seen all the seasons. I think I've seen the first two, and I think there's three or four. Um, it's very good. It's darker than the original, but
Hmm.
it is very good. And it's funny because I in season one, maybe she like, you know, is going to school for the first time, and outside the schoolhouse is this little river, and these little girls are like, put your milk in the river to keep it cool. And like there's like kind of like this little like cutout, I guess, into the bank stream, and like they just kind of tuck their milk right into the running water to keep it cool. And I'm like, well, that's genius. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, what did you do? What did you do when you didn't have refrigeration? You know, you didn't want your stuff to spoil. And, you know, milk was important for families that, you know, and it's like today the thought of drinking milk grosses me out so much. But but that's where big dairy came from, was like this era, you know, the late 1800s, the early 90s. I mean, that is where a lot of children, these country kids, got their nourishment, was because they had a cow and they
Yeah.
were able to drink milk, and they had the protein from butter and milk.
Stephanie, go to your email.
Okay.
I just sent you, Mary Kay found the pattern for the Bluebirds applique
Oh my gosh, of course she did.
and sent it over. Hey, what would we be in this show without our like armchair researchers and stuff, grabbing stuff off the internet and
Oh, this is
everywhere.
awesome. Yep.
So yeah, if you wanted to share your
Yeah, that's awesome. Let me
screen.
share. Yeah, let me share my.
You know, Mary Kay, it's only you that I would answer text messages for during a stream. But I figured most
Well,
people
also,
that know me know I'm streaming, so they're probably not texting me. So I thought by chance it could be an elusive Mary Kay.
well, and also the fact that, you know, we're lucky enough to have people that like kind of find these things very easily.
Right? Yeah, so that is
Oh,
definitely not what it looks like in my book.
yeah, it's definitely upside down. But she didn't make it as shown. She interspersed with those string blocks.
Oh,
So,
that's true. And also her birds are the same. Like both birds on the branch are the same.
mm-hmm. The same colors, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So 1938. Very cool. Thank you, Mary Kay.
Thank you very much.
That's awesome.
Well, you know what's funny? So wait, that one's 1938. This one says she, well, it's guess. I mean, it's a circa 1936. But I'm just wondering
Oh, yeah.
potentially, like, if that is there any chance that that pattern was printed before 1938
Yeah.
and maybe had
Yeah.
like an alternate,
What,
like
so
maybe it
from what
was
I've,
that alternate.
well, so what I've discovered in doing, like looking for the newspaper patterns, is that I want it's like the Kansas City Star was like the big one that printed like everything, but these patterns would kind of make their way around the country. And, you know, I guess they, I don't know, did they have Associated Press back then? I don't think so, but they, you know, the newspaper, some of them would be publishing the stuff at the same time, and some would be years later. You know, like there was one, I want to say it was some of the Ruby McKim patterns that I had been looking for online. And like I would find a set of them in like 1928 or 1930. But I would be missing like one or two because sometimes the paper just didn't print them. Like they would skip a week, like whoops, and then they would never print it. So I would have to go out and look for what I was missing. And I would find it like in 1933 in some of their cities paper. So
I feel
yeah.
like, was it the Mary Schaefer book when they were talking about like the round robins and how they like would get other patterns and stuff? And I feel like maybe it was mentioned in there that a lot of newspapers would borrow from other newspapers like later on down the line. Was that
Yeah.
in maybe?
I think that was in it was definitely in something we read.
Yes. just a blanket yes.
Yeah. But yes, it's very possible that that one that had the date on it, Mary Kay's version, that newspaper happened to print it in 38, and if this is accurate, she maybe got a pattern in 36, but it could have been anywhere from, you know, in the States.
Interesting, interesting, interesting. Oh my God, we're like coming to the ends here.
Oh. So Tom's rocking chair.
Oh my God, I want it.
I know. And you know, I didn't, because I looked at it. I know I glanced at it a few times as I was reading and flipping through, and I came back to read the little sidebar. And I remember, you know, seeing like, oh, his handcrafted rocking chair. I'm like, you know, very cool. And then I read the part about the footrest, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you don't often see a
Often?
rocking chair
How
with a
about
footrest like that.
never?
I do think that it is a thing. Like I think that I don't think he invented that, but it's not something that you see often.
I have
And you know,
never seen.
it mentions Talula's little chair. I called her, you know, they called it her little chair. But and I'm wondering if she made I mean, he made her chair too, or if it was just his rocking chair that he made.
Oh yeah, it doesn't say.
All right, so page 150, the cow.
Oh yeah.
I
At
was like,
first,
oh, this poor cow.
okay, so when I first looked at it, I didn't realize it was a cow, and I thought it was people trying to hold up a quilt, and it like the wind was blowing or something. And I'm just like looking at their legs, like I had to like read the blurb to like
Yeah,
realize
yeah. I had
that
to
it was
look at
a
it first too,
cow.
and I was like, what is going on here? I'm like, is that a cow? And then I read it, and but oh, the poor cow. But
Yeah.
yeah, the quilt and the socks worked for it. Um, but you know, the cow was an important, it was important to their family. Like you couldn't let the cow be, you know, sick or harmed because although these dang farm animals, right? Like the cow's out there swishing its tail around, hitting a beehive, hornet's nest or whatever it was a beehive. Yeah, it says a beehive. And then what was it when she was a child and got her front teeth whacked? What was but that was her, right? Yeah. That was Talula, right? But you
I think
remember
so.
her sister, like her sister.
Yeah, hit her head, hit her,
Yeah. And was that
hurt
the
her in the
chicken
mouth.
coop or something? I can't remember. It was something. The pigs. It was the pigs running around, I think. And that there's so many hijinks here on this farm, these farms.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
is that what's missing from our lives? Like, do we not have as many hijinks because we don't live on farms?
Perhaps I'm sure that we've traded farm hijinks for suburban hijinks.
Which is like my internet went down.
Yeah,
Or
pretty much.
actually today, you want to hear about hijinks? Oh my goodness, today we got like all kinds of, you know how does your state have Amber Alerts?
Mhm.
Okay, so you get that sound on your phone when an alert comes through. I hate that sound. I mean, I'm sure that's by design.
Yeah.
We get them today, and Sunday and I are out eating at a restaurant. So we're getting it in like stereo
Oh
sound because
yeah, because
everyone's phone goes
everybody.
off at once, and it went off multiple times. No Amber Alert, everybody's fine. Massachusetts 911 call system was down. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, what do you even do? And it was down for like, I want to say at least like a good hour and a half. And
Oh,
they kept pumping out like updates and stuff. And yeah, I think it was at least an hour and a half before we got like another of those sounds, the
oh my
emergency broadcast
goodness.
sounds
What
for it
would
to
you
come back on.
do?
And then
It would be like,
apparently too, at one point, I guess their emergency systems are were I guess were kind of linked. Maybe New England. There's a button for New England, and they had to send out a correction at one point because apparently they pressed a button and it accidentally also went off in Maine. So I was like, oh, I mean, I guess you
wow.
could, yeah, but it was interesting
Wow,
for
that's
sure.
wild. And yeah,
So yeah,
what would
those
you
are
do? You'd have to Google the
yep,
phone number to the
yeah.
cops if you
Well, and
needed help.
I also was like, Sunday and I were talking about in the car because it was when we were, you know, driving to home. And I was like, is 411 still a thing? I guess you could call 411 and connect from there. Cause I was like, no one's going to think about Googling, you know, the fire department if they even can. Yeah, I thought the same thing. I'm like, wow, are we going to like have a bunch of news articles about how like 700 people die in Massachusetts between the hours of 2 and 4:30 when the 911 system was down. And
Firefighters everywhere were very bored.
yeah, like I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to like report back. Like,
Yeah, that's that's crazy then. And that's something that like I mean, they didn't have that back then. You
yeah,
know, like if you were yeah, I mean I've heard terrible stories about like, the fire department got there the next day. Like just awful stuff. And yeah, yeah, we really take it for granted that we can get help very, very quickly.
yeah, but I guess that would be the modern, you know, Massachusetts suburban hijinks. Although like I've never experienced anything like that at all. Um Heard they
Extra
have extra
patrols.
patrolling the state on the lookout. Arlene, did you hear about Massachusetts from where you are? I did see a lot of police officers out more than usual
Yeah. Yeah. They
for such
probably,
a
yeah.
hot day. Because we
Yeah.
also had, keep in mind, we also have like a heat wave going on. So there were a lot of people like cooling
Yeah.
centers and things like that. So you'd actually expect kind of more emergencies. But
Yeah.
anywho, if people want to know, I'll post something like in the Facebook or something like, hey, did you want to hear about this weird thing that happened in Massachusetts?
So can we talk about a communication?
Oh, we can. Janet had hijinks on the dairy farm she grew up on.
Oh, a dairy farm. Oh my God. Did you ever have to wrap a cow in a quilt, Janet?
Oh, Arlene said Massachusetts was on the news. Wow, we're hitting the West Coast.
Oh, wow. Yeah, for
I haven't
sure.
had chance to like investigate yet, Arlene, but I had asked when we were driving in the car. I asked Sunday, like, hey, is there a bunch of news articles yet about it? And he's trying to look. He's like, maybe their system got hacked, kind of stuff. He got
Yeah, that was,
ransomware.
as soon as you said that, that was like my first thought was like, oh
Well,
my
he's dealt
God.
with some like fire departments who ended up with like ransomware, which I'm thinking, wow, you have to be the lowest of the low to ransomware an emergency system. But
Yeah.
anywho, so yeah, so your communication there with Mr. Tom Bottom, since you feel in some
Yeah.
type
So
of way.
151. Well, and I just go back to the fact this man was devout in his convictions. And I just, I mean, the way he writes, like the fourth commandment of the Decalogue. I mean, is he, I guess I'm assuming, like, and here's the thing, I'm not a religious person, but I'm assuming when he says the Decalogue, he means the Ten Commandments, right? Is he just trying to be flowery and not say the fourth commandment of the 10 or the fourth commandment of the 10 commandments? He says the fourth commandment of the Decalogue.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you get into I can't remember if it's in this chapter, if it's in the might be in the afterword piece here, where she talks about Flannery O'Connor and the Good Country People. Like I've read a lot of Flannery O'Connor, and Flannery O'Connor's people, like her characters, like, oh, I totally get them. It's like that's some of my relatives too. Like some of these like kooky, like I'm gonna tar and feather somebody kind of Baptists. Like, um, that's why I feel some kind of way about Tom Bottoms. It's just I just can picture him. He's like one of those revival guys. Um, but anyway, I just it just goes back to the fact that I feel his convictions. I mean, I'm not trying to throw any shade on him or anything like that. I just he was
You have
very devout.
experienced people like Tom Bottoms.
Yes, a very devout man. Yeah. And
I have not, although it's funny. My dad is actually from Georgia, but no one talks about any of that. So I'm actually wondering
well,
potentially.
how long did he live there? I mean, did he grow up there or
I
was
don't
he
think
just
he
a
grew up
child?
there, but I'm assuming that
So,
means his parents were from there.
mhm.
His mother is still alive, whether or not she'd
Huh.
remember anything, but I'm actually wondering, there's been any stories told, but I'm wondering if there's a reason why there's never been any stories told. My
Maybe.
mom's technically from Florida. There aren't a whole lot of stories from that time either, other than my
Well,
grandfather's like World War II times, but
that's Florida. Yeah. No offense, Floridians.
I think you mean
Um,
like all the offense Floridians.
so to live or die in Dixie. So poor Molly Ruth. Um, I feel so bad for her that her father did not like her
Mm.
her novel, volume 1 of Taproots. And it's funny because I have heard of a publication called Taproots, and I want to say it's a magazine. I'm not sure.
Yes, I've seen there's
Yeah, they go.
multiple things out there called Taproots.
Yeah, okay. But yeah, it broke my heart that, I would have like I said to you, I'd have been like, huh, I put a lot of work into this. Sorry, Dad.
Well, you know what's
That's
interesting? It's like in the bibliography, it says it's an unpublished manuscript. I'm actually kind of shocked that no one's published it since then. Like maybe if Nancilu didn't try to
yeah.
publish it or someone else in the family, because you know what? Tom Bottoms is
Hmm.
dead, so I don't really care about his opinion anymore.
Yeah, and maybe it wasn't in a condition to, like maybe it needed some editorial work, and maybe it was stuff that I don't know. I mean, there's so much family history. It seems like that, Nancilu was able to get her hands on. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um,
I'm kind of
but
bummed. I would read that.
yeah. Yeah, I would be very interested after having read this. I'd really like to know, like, what is Molly Ruth's take on everything?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the fact that she went to a writer's colony. So and she was
Mm-hmm.
writing for the Christian Science Monitor, you know, she had to have been a good writer. Like, you know, I mean, she had to have been a competent writer, I would think. Um,
Now, just as an aside, Talula's memoir has been published. Her personal memoir.
oh, what's that?
Privately published as autobiography of Talula Gilbert Bottom. Oh no, am I a loser? No.
Oh yeah, autobiography of Tallulah
Yep.
Gilbert Bottoms. Yeah,
Yep.
okay. So Nancilu actually published it.
In 1983, but that's Talula's written memoir, not Molly Ruth's.
Right. Yeah.
Molly Ruth's is about both of her parents.
Yeah, hers is above that in the bibliography and it says unpublished.
Yeah. So we could get our hands on that. Maybe not, I don't, it might be too dense to read here, but like we
Yeah,
could
we'd have to find
potentially
out where it is.
just as an aside.
So that's the thing. Have we solved the issue of where is everything? Like
Well,
who has everything?
but if that's published, you could potentially get your hands.
Well, yeah, what Nancy Lou
Copy.
is published, but Molly Ruth's it's if Molly
Oh,
Ruth's
like
is
who has all
unpublished,
the
where
stuff?
yes, where does it reside? Because I mean, I don't know, is there a Tallulah Bottoms collection somewhere, or is this stuff that's still with individual family members?
Mary
I know that's my
Kay,
question.
call out to Mary Kay. Do you know
Mary,
the
hey,
Mary
let me
Kay?
just send you a Zoom link. Um, but yeah, I mean I feel bad for her that, you know, I mean, at this time it was difficult for women, you know, we've spent time, you know, on my stream reading Ruth Finley and Florence Pito, and I'm trying to think who else have we read, you know, the women that were publishing about quilts early in the 20th century. I mean, they struggled, they put up with a lot of crap. So for women, you know, that have put in the time and energy to write a novel and then not be able to publish it because of a family member, you know, and not the publishing game, like that's sad. That makes me very sad.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Margaret Mitchell, it was said to have closed her eyes purposefully. Um, I'm just like, you know, you look at her and you're like, okay, it tells me everything I need to know about you, but Molly Ruth, the picture, Molly Ruth, she's
Mm-hmm.
got that look on her face that's like,
Yeah, Molly Ruth
and
is in here in the dark dress.
yeah, she's right there in the center. And she just has like that, I don't know, for lack of a better term, she's got a shit-eating smile. She's kind of like, ha 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 ha, you know? And I just feel like she probably was a fascinating person.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's been a ding dong on the phone. She doesn't know. It's possible her archive is in Rochester, New York, near where Nancilu was living. So who knows? To be continued.
Yeah, we'll have to
Well,
do some research.
if you know, you never, you know, it tells us roughly how many people are watching, but it doesn't tell us which people are watching. So potentially someone's watching that we're going to run into at AQSG seminar in September that might be like, hey, you know, so I know blah blah blah. That kind of stuff happens all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like,
Absolutely. You guys cannot even imagine. And some of you have reached out to me, but you guys can't even imagine how many people reach out to us to tell us stuff.
mm-hmm.
And it's wonderful. Please don't stop. We love it. Because, you know, I think you said this to me, like, you know, there's lots of people have done research that have, you know, come before us. We stand on the shoulders of giants. But they had the luxury of doing all of their research and like poking around like at their desks. Whereas we do all this stuff in public.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like,
Yeah, we learn on the spot. So
on the fly. Yep.
yeah, so I mean we have to correct ourselves on the fly, and you know, that's why a lot of times when we're talking, I'm always like, you know what, I may not be correct here. There's someone who's gonna know. But that's the nice thing, is it's a community research project that never ends.
Exactly. So the last quilt in here, the tulip,
Yeah.
I think it's such a cool pattern. And I don't know, for some reason it like it seems familiar to me, but I'm wondering if it's because the setting and just kind of the general shape of it is very much like the birds. You know, it's a pot and some flowers, and it's just kind of got that general similar
I I
shape.
have never seen a quilt that looks like this before, and I did try before we got on. I just did like a quick breeze through Brackman's Encyclopedia of Applique and the piece just
Yeah.
to see, and I saw a few things that were very close in both, because I can't tell, like, is this pieced or is it appliqued?
I'm 90% sure it's applique because in
That's
the
what it looks
close-up
like to me.
one,
But
you can
knowing,
kind of see the pink flower. You can kind of see the green behind it. So it looks
but
like,
the
I'm pretty
fact
sure
that
it's
we know
applique.
that girlfriend pieced stuff, I would never think was pieced. I just got another ding dong on my phone, so somebody might know the answer. Um, it's a Laura Wheeler Alice Brooks pattern.
I was gonna say, I wonder if it's Alice Brooks. So there you go.
Yeah, because since it said like pattern not, found, source not found, I was like, huh, oh, I wonder. But now I have the answer, so.
Well, and the thing is, like, when you see Laura Wheeler and Alice Brooks stuff, it's some sort of like, like I have Kitten in a Basket. That's
Oh
a Laura
yeah, this
Wheeler. Like,
style is
yeah,
definitely recognizable.
they're very like 1930s. Like they've got that I don't know, that energy, that 1930s energy coming off of them.
Yeah, but
Um,
I actually am like, wow, I really like this quilt. I have yet to come across one that looks like that. And I haven't seen one, like in auctions or
yeah.
anything.
I have a tulip quilt that at first when I just flipping through here and saw the close up, I was like, oh, I'm like, no, that's not the same one I have. I have one that's kind of big blocks, but
Mm, mm.
so the afterword, I really appreciated kind of kind of what Nancilu says about, the reality of these people.
Mhm.
And this was something that you kind of said like at the very beginning, that you did not know a whole lot about this time period in the South.
Yep.
And that I think there's a lot of people, all the way to today that have a lot of misunderstandings about what the South was like from, before the Civil War all the way through. And of course now a lot of these areas now are very, they're grown up, they're developed, they're no different than the suburbs you and I live in now. But back when they were farmland, I mean this so that on page, let's see, 161. This is the very first page. At the bottom, she says, there had been no more patriotic people in the whole country than those simple farmers in Georgia before the war, though many would be driven by the evils of Reconstruction to become radicals and rednecks. And yeah, there's a lot of those. There were definitely a lot of those, but there was also far more people that were not. Far more people that were like, okay, my state is doing this thing, so I guess I got to take up arms. And I mean, people were very patriotic. I mean, today you've got a lot of like, culturally, we're not patriotic. A lot of us are not. And I hate to say that. I mean, I'm patriotic, like, but there's a lot of people that are just like, I have too many issues with this country. I'm not patriotic. But at this time period, people were like very, very patriotic. And the idea that everything was about like, the whole South was full of these plantation owners. And, the reality is most of the South was full of people like this that were
Mhm.
just eking out a living and, trying to keep their head above water. And I really appreciate that Nancilu kind of underscored that. And, in a way that I think to me was very humble and not this like, oh, look at the poor Southerners, we get a bad rap, but it was like that was a very thoughtful look at, all of this information and kind of tying it together. And I also appreciated that she mentioned Flannery O'Connor's stories because,
Mhm.
that's a whole other kind of like blown out of proportion, weird Southerner,
Mhm.
and comparing people like that you've read about with the reality, these memoirs of people is really telling, I think.
Mhm.
And, I'm really glad that she did that.
Um, I totally agree. I just want to pluck out one tiny little like, On 164, the
Mhm.
mentioning of a handmade quilt in 1987 that sold for
Oh, yes.
$172,000.
Uh-huh.
I am very deeply upset that there is not a picture of said quilt
Right?
that
Yeah, there
sold
is
for
a
that.
there is an end note though. And does it say,
No.
oh, okay. It was in a speech by Robert Bishop. Yeah, about
Yeah,
Bishop.
just
Eh, dang it.
because yeah, $172,000 in 1987.
Well, I mean, so what would be an auction in Sotheby's?
Yeah,
Sotheby's out of New York. They
yeah.
have in New York.
Sotheby's, Christie's, like
Christie's, yeah. It's probably one of those. It probably would be pretty easy to find. Probably somebody in the audience, probably Mary Kay, might actually know what the quote was, but I think it'd be pretty easy for us to find. But yes, this goes back to, and I mean, this is a conversation we've had. I don't know if it was in relation to this book at all, but you know, the 80s and 90s, definitely there was some insane quilt collecting that was going on, and you saw prices like this. I mean, and yeah, you could, I guess, still see some quilts that would do this, but not as many for sure.
oh no, not right now. Um, unless it was, obviously like if, the Bible quilt
Yeah.
went up on auction somehow, which,
Oh,
would never happen. But if it did,
yeah.
it would
Well,
obviously
yeah.
command.
There's been some stuff that's come like Antiques Roadshow.
Hmm.
There's like an Antiques Roadshow quilt. I think it's a crazy quilt, but it is so spectacular. Like, and it's probably been about a year since I've seen it or more. And I can't think of, I mean, it's just it's a perfect condition, like pristine condition, like the day it was made. And it's just all floofy applique and embroidery and just madness. And I remember seeing it on Antiques Roadshow, and I'm like, that's the kind of quilt that would go for like 150, $200,000,
You
you
think
know?
so? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But
Yeah,
what
I
did
could
they?
see.
Because
Yeah.
Antiques Road, I feel like Antiques Roadshow sometimes, unless they have, because our friend Dana Balsamo was recently on an episode. I don't think it's aired yet. But I feel like a lot of times they're not necessarily having people that are like really qualified to
Right.
deal with quilts.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's why you just often don't see quilts in textiles and things on Antiques Roadshow. At
Oh, I
least I
haven't paid.
haven't.
It's
And I
not
mean, I'm not
something I
saying like
really
I've,
watch a lot.
yeah, we used to watch it periodically.
Hmm.
And I think in the whole time I like maybe saw two textile things. And I think one of them was a Native American piece
Oh,
and
one
it
of the
wasn't,
blankets.
yeah, I want to say it was a blanket or something. It was something, yeah, I think it would have been blanket, like a trade blanket kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the only things I've seen was that quilt. And yeah.
Hmm. Interesting.
So, and you know, this was really interesting where she quotes this Kamala Devi, um, what's the name of the book? Introduction to India, Village Tribal Ritual Arts. It was an exhibit catalog.
Hmm.
Um, oh, it was at the Mingay. But yeah, so and oh gosh, this poor woman's name, Kamala Devi. Okay, I'm not even gonna try her last name. I have a friend who's Indian. She always sets me straight on Indian names, but this one I'm not going to try by myself. But anyway, I thought it was really interesting that she quoted this woman in, you know, it just was such an interesting choice to quote this woman in in comparison to Talula's experience. And I
Hmm.
think, in her mind, she's thinking of like this small, rural, small town. And I think that's probably what the connection is. It was just so interesting to me because I mean, it looks like this show at the Mingue was just a few years before. Yeah, so 81. So it would have been within those few years before that she saw that show, I'm assuming. Um, and I just thought it was interesting,
You're talking
rural
about
village in India, and yeah,
you're talking about
she's
on
got the photo.
168.
Hmm. Yeah, a human touch does something to the fragments. Yeah.
I was gonna say, do you want to actually read the quote?
I can do that. The human touch does something to the fragments which are brought together in the finished piece, where they mingle and cling together, drawn by the magnetism of love, as if seeking one another to give birth to a new life in fresh form, unlike the tumult and pressuring of a powerful machine where the pieces seem helpless and lost. Yeah, and then what she says, thus transformed into artist, greater opportunity to live in intimacy with beauty should not be the privilege of the few, but the inheritance of all. And I suspect that I mean, she's kind of summing up what she feels, you know, that's the greater legacy of quilts. You know, I think that's what she's saying. And I just thought that was such an interesting and cool way to end this with this more modern, you know,
Well,
but also somebody who is coming from a tradition of small rural villages that make things, you know.
Well, and Mary Kay had another little, you know, comment there. She said Nancilu was well read, well traveled, and insightful, and it shows in her conclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Nancilu actually I think was older than I realized. Because there was a picture of her in the book other than her author photo.
Oh.
And yeah, did you miss it?
No, I think, what was it, her when she's a baby?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, no,
Talula
I saw
holding
that.
her.
Yeah, it was,
Okay.
it was, yeah.
Yeah, where is it? I just saw it today.
Oh, don't ask me.
Oh, here it is. Yeah. So Tom in the cotton field, and then Talula with her grandchildren.
Yeah,
and I'm assuming Nancilu is the one she's holding. So, and that was 1920, right? I think. So that would make Nancilu probably a few years older than my grandmother. So she would have, I guess if she was still alive, she'd probably be over 100, right? This is the 1920, and she looks like she's probably a year-old baby. So it's rude to guess about people's ages.
You brought it up.
But yeah, but long story short is it's a shame that Nancilu is no longer with us, because I would love to have met her. She, you know, just her enthusiasm in her paper was, I mean, if Mary Kay had not already recommended the book to us, having read her paper, I would be like, I got to go get the book because I want to know.
And if I remember correctly, I had gotten this book from the library yard sale bin and showed it to you and said, wouldn't this be good for a thing? And then
yeah,
like
and then I was later, like, hey, guess what Mary Kay sent me?
Yeah. So it's amazing how the universe's guiding hand, you know, like comes down to tell us like this book shall be next, you know, like.
Yeah. So thank you, Mary Kay, if you're still listening. Thank you so much. This was a really good book. It was a hard read because oh my God, my heart broke every single page. But you know, and actually Dee Marie had said to me at some point, like it's really a tribute to her that, you know, she lived a very hard life, but the fact that she just forged ahead, she obviously used quilting as like her balm and also as her love language, you know. Yeah, she's an inspiration.
Janet just posted that Nancilu was 97 when she died. She was born in 1917.
1917. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I guess she was maybe a little bit older in this picture than I thought. I still think maybe the picture's not dated correctly then, because she looks like, unless she's the little girl sitting at Tallulah's feet. Maybe. That's a possibility. Yeah.
But see, anyway. Thanks, Janet. I love it when like people watching can like go and doodle the Googler while we're.
Yeah, I've gotten spoiled with some of the folks on my stream because they'll Google things for me.
And Mary Kay said, "You're welcome. I loved rereading it." So on that, just your reminder that next week, we're starting a new fresh book of interesting things. We're pivoting, and we're going to be reading the intro through the pattern section, which are pages 9 through 33. That will get posted in case you forget. And Dee Marie said she's most grateful to Mary Kay, Stephanie, and myself for a great read. Thank you so much for joining us. We enjoy
Thanks so
doing this. I
much.
can't tell you how exciting it is just to read all the books that I have sitting around in this big like quilt history library that I have, where I'm like, oh my God, look at all the amazing things. And I never like read them. I just kind of read snippets of them if I'm researching something.
Yeah, well, and I mean that's the thing in research you kind of have to dip in. You can't often sit down and just read a book cover to cover. And I've been trying to do that with a few books, especially some of the exhibition books I have, like Sewn in
Mhm.
America is the one I just got from the DAR. And it has such great essays in it. I've been trying to read that one, just to because it's got a lot of great information in it. But yeah, this is the best way to get this stuff read for sure.
Mhm. And to
So
discuss.
for sure.
We're not normally
Yeah.
discussing. So just a quick reminder that tomorrow is Wednesday and it happens to be our Needlework Nights day. And we're going to talk about stilettos and pointy things and
Pointy things.
pointy things. Well, you know why? Because technically, like if we're going to talk about stilettos, you kind of also have to talk about like awls, because I feel like to a certain extent people use that a little more interchangeably. So I'm finding interesting things online. PS, like some will be posted in the shop if you need some. And doing
Because
all that.
you got some really good ones recently. You
I
got
did. If you
some that
guys
I'm just
hadn't
like, those
watched
are
the
pretty
most
good.
recent unboxing video, watch that and you'll see some cute stuff in there. Um, so that's what we're doing. And then
Yeah.
you have canceled your Twitch stream for Thursday, correct?
Yes, I am canceled for Thursday because I'm traveling. Might do a pop-up, but I will put it on the Cake TV Facebook page if I do. And yeah, you guys will hear about
And
that.
then we've also discussed doing a special could be pop-up, which is an ask us anything. And I mean anything. Where we're gonna do that and work on our little kind of experimental archaeology cotton stuff, because your girlfriend here like is not as disciplined as Stephanie is in doing that, and I need to get a move on that. So I thought potentially we could work on that and kind of answer some ask us anything questions. So if you have questions related to research, work, love life, history, anything that you want to ask, you can send that to either one of us privately or on our email, which is quiltnerding@gmail.com. I will also put up some prompts if you guys want to ask some saucy questions.
Jill will answer anything. I don't know if I will.
Please. So yeah, we're looking at doing that. It could be this weekend, it might not be. Steph has got some things in the air that we'll have to wait and see if we can plan
Yeah,
around.
I'll have to wait and see.
If it's not a pop-up, we'll definitely announce anything we can announce. So yeah, is that going to do it for us, or you got anything else?
Yeah, I think so. I think that'll do it.
All right, goodbye, Talula. We loved you.
Bye, guys. And goodbye, Talula.
Everybody have a fantastic night. Thanks, Mary Kay.